Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time to. Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney from London in the UploadVR studios as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today with last generation Meta avatars. We're using hand tracking and built-in microphones. We've got tablets in front of us that show us notes and comments so we can interact with our audience live. And thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. It's XR Developer News, Podum, the developer of Smash Drums, Holonet, Mike Manzano, Richard Meller, Parmesan Cubits. Sincerely, thank you all for your support. David, what do we have today?
Yes, hello everyone. We have some really big topics today. Some weeks we come on here and there's only a few things to discuss. Sometimes it's a lot of little topics. This week there are really some enormous ones. Having a look at the comments here, great to see a lot of the regulars in the comments. I see FMeister94 says that they've ordered the Pico waist tracker and they're waiting for it. Do let us know what you think of that when you get it. It's a very interesting product. We're both kind of big proponents of those Pico trackers and what they enable people to do, both for body tracking and, of course, for general object tracking. So we're going to have three sections today. First, we'll discuss some Meta Quest hardware and tech news, including Meta's financing scheme launching in the UK and Quest's web browser getting experimental support for Colocated WebXR. So that's multiple Quests in the same physical space together in WebXR. We will then have two immersive video stories. Firstly, on the Quest side, live sports. Quest owners can watch the NHL Stanley Cup final Rinkside in 180-degree 2D for free. So it's free, but it's 2D 180. We will then discuss a 3D 180 project on Apple Vision Pro, Bono, Stories of Surrender, and it's the first feature-length Apple immersive video. Although, as we will discuss, not all of it is immersive video. It cuts between immersive and 2D with like kind of sketches around the edges of the 2D. So that's an interesting one for sure. Then we will have a very serious major topic that could be one of the most important partnerships in the history of this industry. Palmer Luckey's Anduril partnering with Meta to build military XR devices, starting with the Eagle Eye AR VR helmet. We will get into it at the time, but many of our viewers will know that given Palmer Luckey's history with Facebook being fired by Oculus, fired from Oculus by Facebook all those years ago, it is really astonishing to see Luckey again working with Meta through this partnership. It's something that a few years ago, if you had suggested on a show like this, people would just not have believed it. It just shows how kind of political and cultural climates can change significantly in just a few years. Finally, our end discussion will be what comes after Quest 3. So earlier this week, UploadVR reported that Meta had cancelled its two leading candidates for a traditional form factor Quest 4 and simultaneously was accelerating the development of an ultralight open periphery headset with a tethered compute puck, which the information reported on about 9 months ago, its existence. So we'll get into that. We'll discuss the Wall Street Journal's report that just dropped last night in my time zone about the apparent price of that headset. They're claiming it will be less than $1,000. So make of that what you will. 800, 900, 999. Make that what you will. They also claim that Meta is courting big Hollywood firms like Disney and A24 to make immersive video for Horizon OS, primarily to sell this headset. So that's going to be a major topic of discussion. We're going to get through these kind of four more basic stories first and then get into those two really meaty sections when we can.
Yeah, I actually talked to the creator of the Apple Immersive Video, so that'll be a fun one to talk about. And I'm looking over at our comments here, seeing where everyone is tuning in from. We always love seeing that. We once had a person tune in from Antarctica, so if you're still watching us out there in Antarctica, thank you for tuning in. And I'm seeing Arlen in our comments, all over our comments. I've decided I really want to meet you in VR, Arlen, again. I can't remember if we met actually in VR, but it's time for us to meet and talk about your awesome ideas that you always have in our comments. And Arlen is usually always time traveling to catch up to us, but not this week, so they're tuning in live. I see Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop, out there. Thank you for tuning in today. And incredible work out there on Virtual Desktop, keeping that going. I saw some of those comments out there from Twitter talking about some of the problems that the developers have on an ongoing basis dealing with the test channel releases that become the regular releases. So anyways, let's move through this and get through these topics. I'm excited to talk about several of these with you because it is a big week. I see some of our commenters know this is going to be a big week for us. And we've got AWE next week. We've got Apple coming up next week. And even before then, right, we're seeing lots of news drop this week in anticipation of what we expect to be major next week that will kind of reshape a lot of the way people think about VR and AR. So let's move through it, David.
Yeah, this is going to be a huge month for this industry. There is a lot coming. I see Arlen is saying that you did meet in Walkabout Mini Golf.
That's right. Yeah, it's funny. I do. There was a couple of people I met in Walkabout for a couple of times. So yes, I do remember that, Arlen, and we need to meet again. It's time for us to talk again because, I want to keep our conversation going about these cool ideas that you keep having because not a lot of people have the kind of vision that you have of this whole ecosystem working together, and it's honestly enormously frustrating, David. Like when we talk to our sources, some of them have pieces of this vision, right? Like some of our sources see, oh yeah, VR headsets are really useful. Some of those people are like, oh, AR glasses are the only useful thing out there. And I am not interested in any of this until AR glasses are here. And like sorting out which people we're talking to is very, very difficult. And then we have people like Arlen in our comments who's like, give me the wristbands. I'm ready for them, right? And then he's got the perfect vision of how this all fits together.
Yeah, for sure. And as we'll get into at the end of the show, there's going to be not as harsh of a delineation between this spectrum between AR glasses and full-fledged immersive VR headsets as some people think. There's going to be quite a middle ground there. But let's get into the show here. Let's start with a relatively minor piece of news, but interesting in terms of how people buy their Quest headsets. So last year, around a year ago, a couple of months before Quest 3S launched, you reported, Ian, that Meta had launched a new scheme in the US called Play Now, Pay Later. So that was in partnership with the US fintech company Affirm. And basically it lets people buy their Quest 3 when it launched, and obviously Quest 3S as soon as Quest 3S arrives, in monthly payments instead of all at once. So you get a Quest 3S for 24 monthly payments, 2 years of paying for $20, or Quest 3 for $30 in the US. And that's something that if you just have a basic level of credit, Meta will be able to give you. It's through the Meta store. So the news here is that they've now brought the same thing to the UK, but it's slightly different. So it's in partnership with the Swedish fintech firm Klarna, and the payments are taken for 12 months, not 24. So it's 1 year of payment. So you can get a Quest 3S for £30 a month for 12 months, or a Quest 3 for £46. And in both cases, this comes with Horizon Plus, the new name for Quest Plus, throughout the time that you're paying. In the United States, it also comes with Warranty Plus. That's not in the UK, so some subtle differences there. Meta's not the only company doing this. You can buy a big screen Beyond 2 through monthly payments. I think it's $32 a month for 3 years. So it's kind of more money in for longer for obvious reasons. It's a more expensive headset, but it is kind of an interesting avenue. And obviously, I'm, slightly personally torn on this. It's questionable whether you should be buying things through finance that aren't highly essential. It's going to depend on each person's individual circumstance. I don't want to tell people what to do. At the same time, this whole Klarna Affirm thing, somewhat troubling. I saw like people talking about how like Deliveroo, or what do you call it in America, DoorDash, is offering this kind of payment scheme, and it just seems, I don't know. I get a mortgage, I get a car loan, but come on.
Yeah. And we've got in our comments, so David was sort of, he hadn't even looked at the comments yet, and he was echoing what 808 is out there saying. The economy is in the dumps when people buy a 300 GBP device on a 12-month payment plan. I bought a micro SD card on a payment plan because I needed to have that
What?
amount of storage. I'm sorry. I wanted that amount of storage
Wait,
in an SD card.
how much was this SD card?
I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm going to talk about is how much storage is in the SD
I
card,
didn't
because
know.
if I talk about how much storage is in
Okay.
the SD card, they're going to go Google it and find the amount and get upset with me.
So you're
Like,
not going to even say how much storage there is in this SD
well,
card?
now I've caught myself in a corner here. I'm embarrassed by the amount of money I've spent on it, and I'm embarrassed that I bought it on payment plan. But it's a lot of storage to have in a device that's this big, and I had to have it. I had to have it, David. So I get it. I get the people out there that are buying this on payment plans, and we've just had my heart goes out to the commenter who said this, and David is absolutely right. It is an alarming trend to be buying these sort of like essential, like that's the problem here in my mind, David. A VR headset is an essential device in my head over time. Not this device, not this gen, but it's a personal computer. It's a replacement for a personal computer, for a phone.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, obviously there are circumstances in which this makes sense, right? If you have a steady job you've had for many years, you know it's not going anywhere, and you've just had to make a massive payment, and you can make the payment, whatever. This, in terms of value, it works out to only slightly more expensive than if you had bought the headset outright plus the Horizon Plus subscription, which again, I always got to say, the Horizon Plus subscription is remarkably good value. I'm going to say that every time it's brought up. I promise you, I'm not shilling it. I'm not being paid to say this. I just think if you look at some of the games that are in there, if you're a new person to VR, you haven't had a headset before. Specifically, I'm talking about that class of people, to be clear, new to VR. Some of the best games from the past 10 years are sitting there in the Horizon Plus subscription. So yeah, I can see that working out. People are pointing out that Pimax also does this. They have a really weird scheme where you pay like, let's see if I can remember, 2/3 of the price up front, and then you pay the rest with subscription, or maybe it's 1/3 and 2/3. Whatever it is, it's different than this. You do actually pay like a down payment first for the Pimax headset. The one thing I would note about this Meta offer is that the Meta store online actually does offer free returns for 30 days. They claim. So I did check the terms of this, and it does apply to this. So theoretically, you could just, with a deposit, I guess, of $20 or $30 or £30 or £46, try out one of these headsets for up to 30 days. But they do say, you have to send it back in pristine condition. The packaging has to be original, and, they probably might charge you if you have like scuffs or whatever. So I don't know if I would recommend that, but if you really just want to try out a headset and you don't want to pay full price, you just want to try it out for a few weeks, maybe do this. I don't know how ethical that is, but maybe do this.
Well, I love to try before you buy, right? Like it is a big, until Meta has a retail presence, it's the quickest way you can actually try out VR and then just return it if it isn't for you at this time, right? So obviously a lot of people are going to be introduced to this program over time, and I don't know, I brought up this idea on previous shows. What if they rolled out an early access program for new software updates to people who are members of this Horizon Plus program? You put the PTC channel right inside the Horizon Plus program, and then you only test out your new stuff on the people that really invite themselves to it.
That feels like a I don't want to say evil, but it's like a very good scheme to get people to pay for Horizon Plus. I don't know if any company does that. Correct us if I'm wrong, commenters, but is there a company that has like a subscription to get their beta operating system program?
Yeah, I don't think so. Right, that's what I'm wondering about the model, and we're not used to this, right? We're not used to sort of. Microsoft is the closest example to rolling out a new operating system every few years, and they flipped back and forth on whether they charged for those new operating systems, and
yeah. I see here Shall Alaska joking that Horizon Plus users would suffer more than with the bugs of the PTC, but that's the case with all beta operating systems. I obviously use PTC on one of my headsets because we report on this, but like in my personal life, and this is just me, don't shoot me, I find the idea of running a beta operating system on a device that you have any dependency on crazy. I would never run a beta OS on my phone. I did back in the day, to be fair, but now that I have like actual important things I use my phone for, the idea of putting a beta OS on it just seems like a bad idea. Don't shoot me.
I don't know when we're going to talk about this, so let me just bring up the idea of like the monthly payments thing. It makes sense when you roll it into a cell phone plan, like you're rolling this whole thing in, and it's weird when you got the situation like your cell phone carrier has its own insurance program that you can go and protect your phone with, and it's actually been it's been a struggle for like Samsung and Google and Apple, of course, to have to tell the purchaser of their phone, actually, no, you want our insurance program. It's, like we're the manufacturer of the hardware, and you're probably going to get a better experience replacing your phone with us than if you go through T-Mobile or Verizon, right? And I don't know. That's the kind of tension we have right now in the U.S.
Yeah, I wonder why they only have the Warranty Plus in the US. Like, again, that was a key difference in this financing scheme. If you're in the US, you can get Meta Warranty Plus separately. Like, you don't need to be financing the headset. It is a thing you can just get. It's like Apple Care Plus, but it doesn't seem to be in the UK. So it does make this like less value. Also, weirdly, the US version of this financing scheme lists it as coming with Batman Arkham Shadow, whereas the UK version does not. So, yeah, I guess that's a weird quirk. Are we ready to talk about the next topic, or is there anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about cellular service, right? I just wanted to hint that cellular service is this big expensive thing that we spend, right, $200 a month on. In some cases, if you're running a family with like 4 or 5 lines on it, you get a cell phone bill that's $250, depending on where you are and what services they've packaged onto you. And the more and more I think about what Arlen is talking about with the wristbands, where Apple is moving with watches, and right, unlocking you from your cell phone plan would be a really, really big thing to see all these companies do in various ways. So I would love to see that trend evolve over the course of the year. Yeah, let's move on.
So our next topic is Quest's web browser now experimentally supports Colocated WebXR. So colocation, if you're not aware what that means, it means multiple headsets sharing the same coordinate space in the same room. It is the equivalent of split screen and flat screen. Colocation is the equivalent in XR. So this is something that you've been able to do in native apps, apps on the store using Unity, etc., for years now. And there are some very cool co-located experiences available on the store. For example, the home sports game that's available for mixed reality lets you do things like, play mini golf together in the same physical room, do like badminton and things like that. We obviously talked about laser tag, the great game that does its own real-time scene meshing that uses co-location. But until now, it was not possible to do this in WebXR. You could manually implement it by having people touch the same physical location, use your controller hand and touch a point in space and use that as a calibration point. That's something that developers have been doing for a decade now, probably more than a decade actually, to manually do this. But again, in the browser in WebXR, that was your limitation. But now with the latest version of the Quest browser that's rolling out, the Horizon OS web browser, they've added an experimental flag called shared spaces. The massive caveat here is that this is only between Quest headsets. And the reason for that is that even for native apps, there is currently no cross-platform implementation of colocation, or I should say automatic colocation. Manual colocation, of course, you can do. So OpenXR does not have a vendor-neutral extension for this yet. The platforms do it differently. Meta and Pico do it by sharing it between your user account through their servers. The servers do the matching of the point clouds. Apple Vision Pro does not have colocation at all. You cannot build an automatic colocation experience today with Vision OS 2 for Apple Vision Pro. iPad and iPhone do. The AR kit for those do. You can do it there. And Apple's system actually does like a peer-to-peer on-device implementation, which is really interesting, and we hope to see come to Vision Pro, of course. But so the point is that one headset doesn't even have it. The others do it completely differently. There is no cross-platform system for this, so WebXR can't use it either. That's actually why Meta has made this an experimental flag for this WebXR browser, because it does just leverage the shared spatial anchors underneath the hood. At some point, I'm sure Kronos, the kind of body that runs OpenXR, the industry consortium there, will want to implement colocation, but it's going to be a tough one of how you figure out how to do that, because either there's two ways to do it, right? Either you do it the meta way and you match the point clouds on the server. By match the point clouds, I mean, you find what are the common patterns in the point clouds of the two headsets, and from those common patterns, you can match them. I should really say feature clouds. These aren't like dense recreations of the scene. They're just high contrast features. It's the same feature cloud that your headset uses for positional tracking. It's a slam map point cloud. The server either matches these clouds together or the device does, in Apple's case, for their iPad and iPhone. If you're using a server, that's hard to make cross-platform, because how do you do that as part of like an open API? Like, whose server does this? Does the developers do it? In that case, is each headset manufacturer going to agree to send their tracking slam map cloud, point cloud, over to each developer's server? That has privacy concerns. It also has like proprietary technology concerns, right? Because then you know how exactly their tracking system's working. Or are you going to do it on device? Then you have the same issue, right? Except you're sharing between the local headsets. One of the headsets has to do the matching. You're then sharing these details. So I'm sure that we'll find some kind of way to figure this out. But like right now, today, in XR, the case is that you can have co-location, but only between headsets of the same manufacturer. So you can go into WebXR now as a developer. Our article on UploadVR.com, it links to a GitHub sample of how this works, along with technical details. It is very automatic. So, you really do just go to the same URL, exist in the same space with the experimental flag enabled in your browser, and developers can build on a shared coordinate space. It really, from what I can see in the GitHub example, and there's a video as well you can see in UploadVR.com, is very seamless. I actually played around with some, not WebXR, but just native app co-location. I think this is kind of one of the real magic points of mixed reality that is very undertapped, for the obvious reason that, developers have only really just started to explore mixed reality, plus very few people have multiple Quest 3 family headsets in their home in the first place. But if you imagine over time, this becoming more normal to own multiple headsets in the same home, headsets being cheaper, passing down your Quest 3 when you get what comes next, which we'll discuss at the end of the show, of course, you can see this really being something that is incredible, because it is like, you can have an embodied experience where you're physically interacting in the same room, or you can have a tabletop experience that is like a board game come to life. Demio is a great example that does this today. But I'm eagerly awaiting to see, when do we get this cross-platform? I've explained the technical realities of why it's not Meta being some evil Machiavellian, we're only going to make it for Meta headsets. It's just how the technical architecture works today. But it's not good enough, of course. We all want this to work cross-platform.
Yeah, I'm loving the comments here. Encourage anyone who is new to VR to throw out your questions. If you're nervous about asking something basic, don't be. Please ask it. We've got a very helpful community out there that understands that there's a lot of misconceptions out there, a lot of misunderstanding about how this technology works. So we love seeing those newbies coming into this community. And I love the comments saying they're loving the technical discussion here. I saw someone earlier said they bought a secondhand Vision Pro after hearing it discussed on our show. And I thought that was really interesting. And I wanted to, if that person also has a Quest 3 or 3S in their arsenal, and you've got both an Apple Vision Pro and a Quest 3, I encourage you to go buy Figment XR for both devices. Go into the Apple Store and buy Figment XR on there. Go into the MetaQuest store and buy Figment XR in there. Log into your Figment account on both devices, or log into 2 different Figment accounts on both devices, and then turn on multiplayer in both devices. Get in a room together on both those devices, and then do exactly as David just described. Go take, I think you take you do a pinch and grab and move a thing out onto the floor in Apple Vision Pro. And then on Quest 3, you point to a spot on the floor and you pick the same spot in both headsets. And suddenly, whatever room, everything you're making together in a Vision Pro and a Quest 3 is all synced in the same spot together.
Yeah, I think that's how cross-platform co-location is going to work for a very long time. Once you get Camera Pass-Through API available in the browser, that also opens up doing things like tracking a shared QR code. But then, of course, you need to have a printer or access to a printer. You could try other common objects. You could imagine over time, when more general computer vision is able to kind of run more easily, you just pick any object and you kind of point at the object, and you can imagine making this manual process less and less manual. But there is something magical about automatic co-location, of just putting two headsets on and having them both see the same things with no setup process. And yeah, I think I'm really bullish for this category of mixed reality. A lot of people, you know, only enjoy VR multiplayer. And a lot of people don't see the magic of VR until they try it multiplayer, and they're there with their friend. They have the positional audio of hearing them, their voice come from their avatar's mouth. They're sharing space together. I think that's the case for a lot of the skepticism around mixed reality too. Being able to, with your family, with your spouse, with your friends who you live with, whoever you happen to live with, or if you live alone, having people over for a party and being able to have this 3D immersive experience in mixed reality in the same room. I think that's going to be a major use case of this technology going forward.
I'm seeing a lot of comments about real-time strategy and other sorts of board games in the comments, and that is a big area of interest for me. If you've ever played the game Galcon, Galcon, it's a game on Apple stores. It's like a real-time strategy type game where you've got a universe of planets and you can direct, you're constantly generating new armies over on your planets, and you can direct them to the enemy planets. I would love a spatial version of that. I seem to think it was tested by somebody back in the day. So if you happen to remember those games, Galcon, Galcon, or any of those types of real-time strategy games where you're like, I don't know, managing mobs in space, I would love to see more games like that. Really, really cool idea to see that sort of thing. Anything else we want to discuss here before we move on to the next one, David?
Yeah, I see another commenter, Sao Galaxy VR, echoing what I said about home sports being a great game for this. Somewhat underrated game in general. I think if you're, wanting to play multiplayer with someone who is very new to VR or someone who isn't comfortable being fully immersed, this is a mixed reality game that is like a Wii Sports kind of mixed reality. It's not the best at each of its sports, right? Like you're going to have a better mini golf experience playing Walkabout Mini Golf, or a better, bowling experience playing one of the other bowling games, but it is 4 or 5 sports in a really accessible fashion. And as I keep saying, it supports co-located mixed reality. So what I actually tried recently was badminton, where I was in a very large room and we were both, seeing a virtual badminton net in front of us and, playing badminton in co-located mixed reality. A really magical experience. And I think it really is one of those things that it's like trying VR for the first time and like trying multiplayer VR for the first time. So I think we're just going around in circles here, but co-located mixed reality is very cool.
Yep, I think our audience likes it when we go into these little side things about just cool games and games we like, games we want to see. Yeah, I think we like that. And I like James saying he wants to build that. Wabo mentioning that they love that game. Thomas Ireland, Civ 7 was a mess. It could have been the game that set the standard. Absolutely. Nailed it there. Want to encourage you all, just going to make that pitch to become a subscriber or a member at UploadVR.com. Yeah, if you can support us as a patron, please do so. We don't have a ton of benefits other than just you're supporting the work of journalists as we try to grow a very small team and cover one of the biggest trends of our time. So yeah, let's move right on here, David.
Sure, yeah, let's talk about immersive video. So we have 2 stories here. The NHL Stanley Cup being streamed for free to Quest, and Bono Stories of Surrender on Apple Vision Pro. So let's start with that NHL Stanley Cup final topic. It's always difficult to talk about sports that I don't know much about. I have been to a few hockey games before, but
is it racist to say I think it would be a popular Irish sport?
No, that there is a similar one called hurling, which is kind of somewhat similar but different. I think Canada is where this is biggest, if I'm not wrong, and obviously one of the teams here is, I think, the Edmonton Oilers, and then you have the Florida Panthers playing. So this is the app X Stadium. We've been talking about it for years because its biggest offering is that it offers the NBA in 180-degree 2D. This is free on Quest headsets. 52 NBA games each season are streamed on this app. It's only in the US. The entire of the app is only in the US. You cannot access it outside the US, which is obviously somewhat ironic given that one of these teams here is from Canada. But for these 4 to 7 Stanley Cup final games, you can watch them all in Xstadium. Other sports that Xstadium offers includes like NASCAR, the UFC. So this Stanley Cup final is a best of 7 contest where the first team to win 4 takes the series. So anywhere between 4 and 7 games will be streamed depending on how many are necessary. It started yesterday. The other thing about this app is that it has co-watching, right? So if you're watching an immersive video on Apple Vision Pro, you actually can't watch it with a friend. You can watch it in a 3D rectangular view, but not as an immersive video. Whereas on this, you just invite someone and they're beside you as their meta avatar. I can't use this because I'm not in the US, but I've spoken to some people who use it who love it. In fact, sometimes I say something along the lines of, you know what, this is really cool, but it's only 180 degree 2D. It's only 2D 180 degree. So I don't know how much appeal it is. And then I get like messages and email from people being like, I love this. I'm a huge basketball fan. I don't care that it's 2D. I can go rinkside. So again, we are going to say what we always say, which is it would be far, far better for it to be 3D. But if you are a fan of the NHL and you do plan on just watching this sport anyway, you might as well give it a try. If you have a Quest headset, it's free if you're in the US. So what's better than free, right?
Well, good is better than free. And I think that brings us to the next one, the Stories of Surrender story. Are you ready to talk about that one, or is there anything you want to talk about with this one? Because I want to.
Sure. I just want to read a few comments here. People echoing the hurling thing is actually more popular in Ireland.
I am curious about hurling, and I don't think he even understood why it was racist to suggest that hockey might be.
I don't
because
get
there's
it.
a lot of fighting in hockey. They
oh, there's a lot of fighting in hurling too. Don't worry.
Okay,
and in
I'm sorry to David Heaney and the Irish people.
There's also like an Irish version of football, Gaelic football, which is very violent as well.
That sounds fun. Oh man, that sounds like a fun watch. And give me that. All right, so it's like that's the thing, right? I want that volumetric right here, and I want to see your reaction when some Irish dude gets flung off the side of a mountain in Ireland in Gaelic football, right? Like
they don't play it on a mountain, but okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's just what the image is for me. It's what I want, right? Okay, I'm sorry. I've offended the Irish people again. I apologize. All right.
So Daniel Leeper is echoing that hurling is indeed brutal. Thomas Ireland saying hurling is a rough sport. Yeah, I'd love to see. So this is obviously rinkside hockey, which is violent in itself, but I'd love to see kind of like pitchside hurling and Gaelic football. That would be violent. And you David in 3D as well. Shake the headset.
We got David over in the United States once, and he didn't know cornhole was a sport, right?
I'd never heard of it.
Yeah, we were in a bar and we're looking at it up on the screen, and David is just shaking his head, trying to wrap his head around American culture. Yeah. All right. I want to talk about Stories of Surrender, David.
Sure. I just want to bring up James O'Loughlin's comment of good is better than free. I feel like I almost have the article ready to come out of, my keyboard that one day we're going to see Xstadium is now 3D 180, right? When is it going to happen? Who knows? But clearly the people at Xstadium must be thinking we need to get this to 3D. It's puzzling to think why they haven't done it at this point, right? They have the NBA, they have the NHL. Maybe there's just like fundamental tech reasons that make it more challenging, but they have Meta funding as well, right? Meta is one of the companies that funds Xstadium. They had like a partnership to stream their stuff in Horizon Worlds as well. Not this one, but the NBA also goes through Horizon Worlds through the same tech. So I'm surprised to not see that. Yeah.
The Scottish Mountains of Ireland. I love that from Dunadim. Okay, I'm sorry about that. And then everyone else is Googling cornhole, who is still non-believing that cornhole is a thing. Yeah, that you throw a little baggie in the hole over there. It's a thing.
The VR game for it as well on Quest.
Yeah,
our cornhole. I think was that how I discovered it, or did you tell me?
I think that we talked about it. Yeah, it was during that whole period. And yeah, go get some culture and play that, and I'll be looking for Gaelic football.
Cornhole just sounds so American, If you had to guess, you would tell that came from America. Anyway, yes, Bono, Stories
All
of
right, that's fair. We'll own that word. Thanks.
So Bono, Stories of Surrender is the first ever feature-length Apple immersive video. Technically, I guess. So the previous longest video was the Metallica concert experience, which is 25 minutes. This is 1 hour and 26 minutes. So this Bono documentary dwarfs the previous longest. However, as I said at the start of the show, it's not entirely immersive. You watch it as an immersive video. A lot of the scenes are immersive, but many of them are just rectangular in front of you, while they do kind of have like his doodles and drawings. The reaction to this that I see in our comments and that I see, in all of the social media is, oh God, not Bono. There does seem to be a kind of repulsion by some people, but other people are obviously going to be huge fans and enjoy this. And I think that is still the case with immersive video. You're not going to go and watch an immersive video about something or someone, a band you don't care about, a person you don't care about. But I think everyone's going to have that moment where over time it is their band, their person, their concert, their sport, their experience. And that's when you'll kind of see the magic of it. And on a tech level, to be clear, this is, the immersive video here is just like the other Apple immersive video, leagues ahead of the Quest immersive video we were just talking about. This is 8K, 3D, 90 FPS, HDR, perfect spatial audio. This is the bee's knees of kind of immersive video technology. So it's very high quality. Apple Immersive Video continues to be the company's primary focus for Vision Pro content, and they are just constantly delivering more and more. We had that Metallica concert. Before that, there was the Weeknd's immersive music video, I should say. There was that Submerged short film from the director of It's All Quiet on the Western Front. Yes, I just said the F word. There's also a lot of Apple series, right? They have Boundless. I was wondering if you would point that out.
No, I'm just going to point it in my ear and just let our audience know that I heard it. They heard it. We didn't need to talk about it, right? I was just, yeah.
You got to wonder if I'm just playing it up at this point, but yeah. So Apple is really committed to Apple Immersive Video. What we always say, and we're going to say it again. I'm sorry if you're a regular viewer. When is it going to be live? Apple, keeps also having their own sports things, but it's highlights of games months later. So it's this weird dichotomy where on Quest, you got to watch the game live, but in 2D. And on Apple Vision, you get to watch the game's highlights months later, but in super high quality 3D HDR. Can we get a middle ground? Can we get live, but much higher quality? I really hope so.
Fascinating. All right. So I have been waiting to go off and explain or think about this whole thing. One of the ways I watched, so I only watched the immersive version of it, so the one that was made for immersion. And what was fascinating, and not many people realize this about the platform, even though this was made in 180-degree 3D stereoscopic presentation, you can totally size it down into about this size rectangular format and present it in a window floating over there while you do a whole bunch of other stuff in VR. So I was writing an article over here while watching about 5 minutes of this hour and a half long documentary in this window over here. What that has the effect of doing is while you're doing this over here, something catches your eye in the documentary, you can actually lean in and see parts of the image that you can't see through your little frame that's blocking some of the details around here. So you can like lean and see a couple interesting things that are sort of out of frame. Now, of course, this is better if you go fully immersive. That's the way it's intended. You want to stretch that out and go full immersive around you. But this is where it gets really, really interesting when we talk about the difference between X Stadium and what the 360 thing is. I'm absolutely... I thought about this for many, many, many years. If you go back to the Olympics and the way the Olympics are communicated globally, the way live events happen in the Olympics, it's actually in like the best interests of NBC and whoever has paid a couple $2 billion for the rights to broadcast the Olympics to hold back the results of various sporting events until prime time in a specific country. So there's actually like a market need to not spoil the outcome of various sporting events until they're ready to get 10 million people at 8 p.m. ready to watch the finals of a specific event. You see this with the ball dropping on New York on New Year's Eve. The ball drop happens at 9 p.m. on the West Coast. It happens at midnight in East Coast. And then at midnight on the West Coast, everyone watches the TV as a ball drops that dropped 3 hours ago, right? They watch a taping of the ball dropping as they count down to midnight. We have a really messed up concept in our head of what actually live is. All that's to say that the ultimate format for me, David, would be a volumetric representation of the field, as well as the fully immersive view simultaneously. And I can go back and forth between each of them as I please, right? I could have the volume right here, and I watch the whole sporting event happening right here while I'm doing all my work. And then I zoom in really quick and I go full screen and I go 30 seconds back to watch a replay in fully immersive that caught my eye in that little volumetric, view. I need all of the above for the right sport. And I need the ending of the sport game, of the sports ball, not to be spoiled before I have all of these things in front of me.
Yeah, I think you bring up a very interesting point about the volumetric view. This story kind of almost came and went, but the NBA does have this on Apple Vision Pro, right? You don't have immersive NBA streams on Apple Vision Pro, but the NBA app does offer tabletop. So it's an even weirder scenario where on Quest you get, live 180-degree 2D. On Vision Pro, you get this tabletop view as well as obviously a flat screen view of the game. And as you say, ideally you want to have all of this, right? You want to be able to, if you are needing to have like peripheral awareness of other things in the real room, be able to bring this down to a volume and then expand it out, just like full screening a video. I think like still in most cases, you're going to want to have the immersive video because on Quest, at least, you can still have your windows open while you're in it, right? You can be in a stadium and watching one of these sports and then still have your windows open and be doing your work, right? You could be doing work while you're in this. On Vision Pro, you did actually get that developer option enabled to do that through Mac Virtual Display. And did you try that with the Bono one, or had you already finished it by that point?
Sorry, I was distracted by the comments. Ask the question again.
Sorry, I was just asking the Vision Pro developer option that allows you to keep Mac Virtual Display open in an immersive video. Only Mac Virtual Display, not other windows. Did you manage to get that working inside immersive
and
video?
It was cool. It was very interesting to have both of those. It's like having it's like having a mission control in the center of your immersive VR space. It's very, very nice to have just that singular window like represented right here. It's a little distracting too, right? It's obviously very distracting for this whole immersive experience you've got. But yeah, I the moment you showed me how to activate that and get that developer mode on, it was a pretty key moment.
Yeah, I think it depends what kind of content you're watching for live sports, right? If you are just watching like a 90-minute, 2-hour game, whatever your sport happens to be, or even if you're watching something way longer, like you can imagine in the future, Formula One, NASCAR, kind of just having this live video, immersive being your background. It's essentially just your home background to do work would be super interesting, right? So today you might go and kind of sit in your room on your laptop and have the game or the match or whatever it happens to be up on your TV in the corner. The equivalent here in Spatial XR is that you're immersively courtside in the game while you're still typing away on your laptop. And yeah, I do want to echo what Daniel Leeper said, is though that for sports, live is very, very important. You can imagine though, right?
Oh yeah.
Concert, it's not critical. Concert, you kind of go anyway and it's done, over and over again for 10 days. They go around the world. But I think like specifically sports, and as you've brought up many times, right? NextVR, the company that Apple acquired to develop Apple Immersive Video, was doing this, or at least testing this, years ago, like in 3D. So it's surprising that it's taken this long. I'm very surprised that currently today on neither Quest nor Apple Vision Pro can you watch 3D 180-degree live sports. That seems, in 2025, that's surprising.
No, no. So Thomas Ireland saying, I follow horse racing, and most of what I see meant to be live is 3 to 4 seconds late. Wasn't it the plot of The Sting back in the 1960s was to delay the results of a race so that they could cheat someone out of money or something? I love that. Have you ever had the experience where you're watching a major sporting event, and you hear the neighbors scream about 2 seconds before you see something happen in your house? That's the difference between getting something streamed online and something broadcast over the air because of the difference of buffering. And it's a real issue. How do you do that for the volumetric information coming off of every body that's moving around there on the court? You're talking about basketball, you're talking about 20, 30 people that you want to represent every single limb in the exact right position at the time. I
Yeah,
was
so
laughing to myself here, David. The game curling. Curling is the right fit for this, where you've got slow moving bodies. The field isn't huge. The object that you're tracking isn't moving super fast. And so now you've got the perfect sport where you could volumetrically make it very small. You've only got two people out there whose bodies you have to track in every position. This little curling, sphere is sliding on a
I,
nice
I
float, nice speed.
I think you'd be surprised by how good these body tracking systems are today in a lot of these sports that are used for, referee assistance. Um, you can literally a couple of seconds after this has occurred on many TV sports channels now, they show, the player's body perfectly 3D represented down to, they're using this to judge like centimeter distances. So I don't like, this is achieved obviously because they have dozens of
You
high-end
just
cameras and a very
you,
high-end computer in the system. That's not really a problem. I don't think.
just broke my brain, right? Okay, we're watching a horse race, right?
Mhm.
And waiting for the organization that runs the horse race to identify whose horse's nose crossed the finish line first. And after 30 seconds of analysis of all the cameras, they've decided horse B is the winning horse in this horse race. And they hit send on a package of data that sends out all of the volumetric camera data from this field to our headsets at home. And you and I are sitting here watching the horse race, and boom, the instant replay comes up right here. And we
Sure.
both lean in, right, to see which nose is first. And we're like doing this thing to see exactly which nose is first across the line.
Yeah, I think that echoes what quite a few commenters are asking about, which is like, when do we get volumetric, right? So it almost feels crazy that what we're talking about here is just, on Quest 2D 180, on Apple Vision Pro 3D 180, but it's 3D, but it's not 6 off. It's not volumetric. You move your head and the entire world moves with you. It's going to be a long time until we have volumetric. It's a fascinating idea that you present to just do it for specific highlights. Um, I wonder if they could pull that off sooner, but even still, it's going to be a long time till we get that. And I just want to echo what I said before. It's frustrating that it's taken this long. Like, we're only starting to see these sports come online. Um, I wonder, we'll talk up near the end of the show, obviously, about what comes next for Meta, but I wonder if they're going to really want to step this up for live sports. We know, as we'll talk about, they're talking Disney and A24 for pre-produced content. It would make sense for that too. All right, we're ready to move on to.
Davin just dropping casual mind breaking comments into our comments. It's the same level of mind breaking as the lights in video games use real electricity. Yeah, yeah, I love it. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to think about. So our next topic is something that is very profound, very serious, and as I indicated earlier in the show, could be one of the most serious and important partnerships in the history of this industry, and could significantly shape the future. So Palmer Luckey's Anduril is partnering with Meta to build XR products for US and US allied militaries, starting with the Eagle Eye AR VR helmet. We've discussed Eagle Eye on this show before. It is Anduril's first XR headset. It is designed to go on the head of every soldier in the US at least, and in allied as well, and give them the kind of situational awareness that you would get in a video game. So that means friendly markers upon friendlies, not just your nearby other soldiers, but when an aircraft flies over, you see that blue dot and knows it's yours. You see a line of where it's just about to bomb and kind of a highlight of where the safe area is. It identifies people holding weapons that aren't friendly in your view and marks them and has a level of saliency. And critically, all of this is networked between all of these headsets and all of these other assets. If you don't know what Anduril is, it is the defense company that Palmer Luckey founded after he was fired from Oculus by Facebook back in 2017. So he didn't stew around. He very quickly went and he's one of the few people that have double unicorned, as in Oculus was sold to Facebook for a total value of around $3 billion. And now Anduril was recently valued at $28 billion. One of the few people to find a multi-billion-dollar company twice like that. Maybe one of the only to get fired and then do that. And so the network I was referring to earlier refers to Anduril's core product, which is Lattice. It's a software system that takes in sensor data from a wide variety of platforms, both Anduril and third-party, and autonomously integrates it to build a unified view of the entire battle space while bringing attention to the most salient events and targets. It essentially gives commanders like an RTS game view of the world that brings in all of these sensors to figure out where is our friendly assets, what are the risks to them? Where are the enemy assets? What can be moved here? It suggests, deploying different autonomous assets to deal with things like incoming cruise missiles and drones. Luckey's argument with Anduril is essentially that the future of warfare is not going to be exquisite small numbers of systems like the world we grew up in, where it's all about having your fancy stealth bomber and your fancy stealth fighter, but it's about having the best software controlling a large number of assets. And Anduril obviously makes a bunch of these different drones. So the news of this Meta partnership comes 3 months after Anduril announced that it is taking over the US Army's IVAS program from Microsoft. The IVAS program, if you aren't aware, is this program that aims to equip every soldier with this AR helmet. So this is the program. Microsoft was leading it with a customized version of HoloLens, but earlier this year, as we've talked about, Anduril has taken it over. Microsoft's has been plagued with issues. It just wasn't good enough. Palmer Luckey thinks he can do good enough with now Meta as the technology partner. So IVAS is now kind of being renamed or rebranded to SBMC, Soldier Borne Mission Command, and Anduril and Meta have already jointly submitted a proposal for it as a team. So the companies have not formally said exactly which Meta XR technologies will be used in Eagle Eye, which is this product that they are pitching for this US Army program. But when discussing the rationale for the partnership, Luckey specifically did mention Meta's multi-billion-dollar bet to develop optical-grade silicon carbide optics that achieved heretofore impossible levels of field of view and acuity. So that strongly suggests to me that one of the things that Anduril will leverage in this partnership is the silicon carbide lenses of Orion. You may remember from our many discussions of Meta's Orion AR glasses prototype that the reason that they're able to achieve that remarkable 72-degree diagonal field of view in Orion is that they use this exotic wonder material, as they call it, optical-grade silicon carbide. The massive issue being that there exists no commercial supply chain for optical-grade silicon carbide. It's incredibly expensive to manufacture. Meta was literally growing crystals in its basement. And so Meta freely admitted to the world at Connect after showing this amazing Orion AR glasses prototype that it could not actually be manufactured as a product. If they did want to, they would have to charge above $10,000. But of course, if you're a military, $10,000 is actually a reasonable price. And so there could be a kind of synergy between these companies here, where Anduril gets access to the results of Meta's billions of dollars of R&D, these world-class Orion lenses that we are not aware of any other fully integrated prototype that can do what Orion does. And Luckey suggests that too. So then, again, this is only my kind of reading of what Luckey says. The idea here would be that Anduril leverages these lenses, and as they are building it, They build out a supply chain for it, which brings down the cost over time, which for Meta means that they can ride that same supply chain and then ship consumer AR glasses that actually live up to Orion. So just like what enabled VR to kind of reemerge was piggybacking off the smartphone display supply chain, and with standalone headsets, the smartphone chip supply chain too, Meta would be able to piggyback off the military XR optics supply chain that they are providing the lens designs for in order to get a viable, appealing AR glasses system out sooner. But to be clear, Luckey made clear that Eagle Eye is modular and can have multiple different display systems. So the helmet itself, you can swap in, a waveguide transparent AR style display system, a VR style pass-through system, and they actually want to build an open architecture for that so that any company can do that. And he wants to make it as low cost as possible. So that's the details of this partnership. Meta is this tech partner for this XR headset for the military. And I pointed out earlier that it is just remarkable that Palmer Luckey is working with Meta again in any capacity. He was fired by Facebook from Oculus in 2017. We can go into that or not, but it would have been crazy to suggest to someone even a couple of years ago that this would happen.
Ooh, a lot of thoughts. This has been brewing for a really long time. Kind of seen the writing on the wall. We saw the writing on the wall for the IVAS program last year sometime. You can find records of us talking about it on our various podcasts, and you could kind of smell in the air that Palmer Luckey's Anduril was coming after the $20 billion that was originally intended for the HoloLens program, militarizing the HoloLens program. If you go back into the history books, you recall that there were a whole bunch of people that signed a letter, I think, at Microsoft in protest of building those sorts of tools. But as we've kind of pointed out on this podcast again and again and again, field of view wins out. The ability to insert objects into your field of view works so well. I want to go off in like another direction and just ask about believing in this technology. What kind of power do you get by believing in virtual reality? I want to think about that. And I want to think about whether there's a difference in belief in these technologies between this guy and a difference in belief in these technologies from this guy. Do they share the same vision for the future, or are there differences between them?
I don't know if they share the same belief, but they certainly are sharing a belief in VR and AR. Palmer Luckey actually said around a month ago on a podcast that in his view, Mark Zuckerberg was the world's #1 VR fan. And he has this very funny clip. I posted it to social media, X and Threads and Blue Sky, where he says, I wish I could be the world's #1 VR boy, but I'm not. Mark gets that title because he spent, $60 billion on this. And for 10 years, since no one believed him, and still while most people don't believe him, and that level of conviction is kind of something that he respects. So I think like these are both examples of people who believed. Obviously, Luckey believes before, right? Because he's been doing this since he was a kid. He essentially single-handedly rebirthed the entire kind of VR industry and gave us, the Oculus Kickstarter and that's entire modern wave of VR. And then eventually Mark Zuckerberg acquired his company for $3 billion. But, to Mark Zuckerberg's credit, acquiring a VR company for $3 billion in 2014 is definitely indicative of conviction, right? Like, remember the headlines back then? Remember how people reacted to this? Remember how most people in the industry, the tech industry, the game industry, were kind of perplexed at that valuation? And now look where we kind of are today with how Apple and Google and all of these big players are trying to build out an XR platform from scratch.
Yeah, I'm gonna get weird here for a minute and start talking about the economics of war, right? You build you build 40 bombers that cost $10 million a piece, and they get exploded by a $500 drone that you attached a $50 piece of explosive to. The comment about Luckey saying that he would love to be number one fan of VR. What if Luckey's just hoarding his resources more effectively in support of VR over the long term than Mark Zuckerberg, right? Mark Zuckerberg is throwing a large amount of those billions of dollars that Luckey just estimated he spent on these AR glasses. What if Luckey is far more focused on spending his money wisely?
Well, I think it's both, right? Like Anduril, as I said, their Eagle Eye helmet is modular. That's why they call it an AR VR headset. It can have transparent optics display system inserted into the front of it, or it can have a VR style display system with pass through. It is this kind of integrated helmet that provides, ballistic protection and all of these things, but the display system is swappable, and that's really fascinating. I don't think either of these two people are betting on one of these technologies exclusively. I think they are hedging, both of them hedging their bets on both. Um, with Zuckerberg,
Mm,
as we'll talk about near the end of the show, you have the Orion AR glasses project, but you also have, Quest and the coming ultralight tethered headset Puffin. We'll talk about it at the end of the show, but I don't see either of them going one way. I think it's fundamentally a modular helmet.
well, I have a hard time. I have a hard time with it. With you sort of suggesting that they're both hedging their bets at equal values. I don't think that's fair. One thing I want to throw out there is Luckey is on the record as being a big proponent of Bitcoin, and he's got a couple postings, I think, in public showing when he was hodling at various rates going back to, I want to say, like 2013 or something. He was that into it. And if you go back to the amount that David tossed at in this show, 3 billion. What's fascinating is that on the reporting of how much Mark Zuckerberg spent on Oculus, you'll see different numbers thrown out there. And in retrospect, I'm guessing the way it went was $1 billion for Palmer Luckey, $1 billion for Brendan Uribe, and then $1 billion for the rest of the holders of the stock. Now, I could be wrong on that. That's just my guess, but based on various comments I've heard, my point is they've even been quiet about the amount of money that was dropped on Oculus. It hasn't been clarified of exactly who got what in what breakdown and all that. The context I'm trying to bring on this, hoarding resources and trying to steer the future in your particular direction, is that I would be willing to bet that this guy may have made more money out of Bitcoin than he did out of Oculus. And I don't think anyone has really grasped that level of funding might be out there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is that Anduril has probably made him more money in terms of value. A lot of the time when people talk about billionaires, they have this idea that like they open their bank account app and there's literally $1 billion there. That's not obviously how the world works. Most of this is the value of the shares they own. So when we're talking about money, to be crystal clear here, we're talking about the values of the share that they own. I'd say Anduril is most likely far beyond any of that. I saw a comment here earlier suggesting that a few minutes ago, apparently, Anduril's valuation has increased to over 30 billion. So I said 28 billion earlier, but at 30 billion, that's only 10 times what Oculus was sold for. So, I mean, people really, I think Anduril doesn't get enough publicity in terms of its significance. I'm not saying positive or negative. I'm just saying if you're aware of the existence of Lockheed Martin and Boeing and General Dynamics, you should probably be aware of Anduril. The rate at which it's gone from being a scrappy upstart that people thought was just for border sentry towers to now being one of the prime defense contractors in the Western world is pretty remarkable.
No, I'll go so far as wondering whether Palmer Luckey has eyes on being CEO or CTO of Meta. If current strategies don't go well, right? Like if if they realize that they've somehow missed the boat in some substantial way, even though they had this 10-year lead, I would be turning to the creator of the Oculus Rift and going, what did we do wrong? What should we do next? I love the comment from Davin Bigelow saying the classic Apple Microsoft technique of waiting for someone else, in this case Xerox PARC, to do the research to invent something, then copying their success is vital to the VR Silicon Valley style boom. We are having this conversation right before Apple announces a whole new slew of products or software updates at the very least next week, that we're going to see exactly how serious Apple is about this space.
Yeah, I get your point on the investment, right? A way you could look at this is that, Luckey sold this company to Facebook. It was widely reported as $2 billion. You're right. There's a lot of conflicting reporting, but my understanding is that the total value of the acquisition was around 2.8 to 3 billion. But
there was a quote from Arib that I remember floating around, and it's $1 billion to me, as I recall. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. But even then, right, his company gets acquired for this amount. He's able to then, a few years later after he gets fired, go and find this defense company that gets even bigger. And then, 8 years after that, he is now able to leverage the R&D that Mark Zuckerberg has spent, the tens of billions of dollars that he has spent, to then in his own products again. There is definitely it's hard to see that Luckey isn't the winner out of this kind of situation, right? He said on this podcast, you can go and watch this Ashley Vance interview, that Anduril could go and invent this tech they're going to use for Meta themselves. But why would they, spend billions of dollars in years to do this? As you kind of hinted at earlier, half of Meta's spending that everyone thinks is VR and Horizon Worlds is on these AR glasses, right? These Orion AR glasses that use these exotic advanced silicon carbide lenses. This is the result of billions of dollars and around 10 years of research and development. And now Anduril is able to just leverage that straight out of the park. So, I mean, the real loser in this is any of Anduril's competitors. They're going to have to, go and just, use off-the-shelf tech or kind of leverage like existing companies, like I guess Magically, for example, they are now selling their AR optics to people. But yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how this turns out. And he's hinting that this is, like, the announcement itself hints this is just the first XR product. They also plan to make, lighter visors for police officers, law enforcement. They want to have different helmets for all the different types of people in the military. They obviously, I think, want to have, VR style training systems. Even this Eagle Eye helmet, as I said, you can insert a VR style display system. I think this is going to be an enormous partnership, and it makes you realize how silly a lot of the kind of calls from some of Meta's investors, you should shut down Reality Labs, just give up, is like, this is a hint that this technology, AR, VR, MR, XR, whatever you want to call it, is going to be so much bigger than people think and touch so many more aspects of our lives that, the US Army and Palmer Luckey, they want to put this on every soldier's head. Like, this is not a small scheme. This is worth an enormous amount of money over decades.
You remember Starship Troopers near the start when he loses command of the squad because there was a training accident that took the life of another soldier, another Starship Trooper. That's, a lot of people are lost in training exercises. A lot of death, a lot of injury that happens just learning how to use these systems. You could potentially take away all of that with a VR headset, and we've been consistent on this, pointing out this possibility for quite a long time here. And just, it's gonna, you and our audience now get, have this link to go send out to people and go, oh, you thought VR was just for games, right? It's for this too. I want to throw out just another, before we move on to the next section, I want to talk about West versus East a little bit. And I try not to subscribe to any kind of West versus East mentality. I try to reject it, from my thinking, even though there are differences between, the culture and the legal frameworks for free speech, free expression that are very, very different in different countries around the world, right? Russia, China, United States all have very different structures around them for how we can speak. What I want I want to talk about that East versus West mindset inside the framing of. I hate to just crack this one open on our show out of nowhere, but the job losses that are accumulating to AI, and the overall trend of tasking people working at jobs where they weren't using AI last year. Now they're being told they have to use AI to continue holding their job for the next 2 years. What I'm wondering, just you go out to the whole macro scale, are we going to see a lot of mergers and like sharing of Western corporate information? Like, are we going to see Google and Amazon you remember the old Google's on Epic nightmare video that we watched 15 years ago that imagined a conglomeration of all our Western companies? Do they have to start sharing and sharing their data stores to create better AI because they all have exclusive repositories of information that can train an AI on? And we're just on a path that sees all of these companies slowly merge. So we have like one provider of VR headsets in the West. Like, it's a very weird long-term 10-year, 15-year. What is the overall direction of this market? How strong is the West? Because underlying all of this is, how do we manufacture these devices without a whole weird global chain of manufacturers and suppliers? There's a real force to like, we need to build this in the United States.
Yeah, that is on the issue of local supply chains. That's something that Anduril actually has been really pushing for. There is a deep awareness here that, you know, the whole point of a lot of this hardware is that if there is a war with China, that we don't lose heavily. And you're going to lose anyway if you can't sort of produce any more hardware because you're so dependent on China. Anduril has been heavily focused on US-based supply chain. Even Palmer Luckey's little side company, the little Game Boy thing that he makes, the recreated Game Boy, is actually manufactured in the US and yet sold for $199. And again, in this interview, we linked to it in our article, Palmer Luckey's interview with Ashley Vance. He says, I've just proven it. You can do it. You can sell affordable consumer technology manufactured in the United States. So obviously it's a big difference.
And take a loss, right? And take a loss.
I don't know. I don't know if they sell it at cost or actually take a loss. But I think it's obviously a lot different in the military sector compared to the consumer sector, right? I want to come back to something you said earlier about, you kind of pontificated of like, could one day Palmer Luckey actually return to Meta? And you suggested, could he be like the CTO or CEO of Meta? That's certainly an interesting long-term thought. But I wonder in the shorter term, could we see, if he is working so heavily with them on this military XR stuff, could we see him consult on consumer stuff? So in John Carmack's last years working with Meta, he was a technical consultant. He was not a full-time employee, but he did, I think he said multiple times a week, go in and talk to Andrew Bosworth and I assume other people in the Meta executive team and, the staff at Reality Labs, and give his view and feedback. I wonder, could you see Carmack's focus there was obviously software. I wonder, could you see Palmer Luckey be the same thing for hardware? I wonder if, as we're just about to discuss, when Meta's thinking about its next generation of hardware, now that they're working with Luckey in some capacity anyway, do they get him to come in and say, oh, here's what I think about this. This is how you could tweak this. Because, I'll let the audience decide whether they think this is the case. But Palmer Luckey has on multiple occasions referred to himself as the world's best HMD designer, the world's best headset maker. And you can, if you owned a Oculus Rift CV1, you're probably going to have a view on whether he's right about that. A lot of people would argue that despite the fact that it uses, 1K per eye displays, it still holds up remarkably well as a design, has some of the best ergonomics. If you had to design a headset with the technology of something that can be released in 2016, it's hard to do better than the Rift, in fairness. We'll have to see with the Anduril partnership and Eagle Eye, does he still have it? But his claim, at least, would be that he is this. The fact that Meta is in this partnership suggests they think at least that's partially true. Do they get Palmer Luckey to consult on their consumer hardware as well?
I had to leave one comment on the previous image that had so many comments talking about when they saw Luckey and Zuckerberg side by side. The comment I saw on the YouTube video commenting on Luckey was, "That's Iron Man at home." Like that was the comment. That was the top comment on YouTube, was, "There's Iron Man at home." We're ready to move on to the next subject. Really great discussion here. Thank you for the thoughtful comments. I think a lot of people, I think we've crossed a bridge here over in our comments, really painting this picture for a lot of people. There's a lot of people in our comments that aren't aware that drone warfare is warfare now. If there is a World War III, it will be fought with drones, and you need to be aware of that.
And drones are the hardware, but the kind of Anduril Luckey discussion here is that what they think matters is the software. Everyone's going to have roughly the same drones. The hardware differences are going to be relatively minor. What matters is, what is the AI software system controlling these swarms of drones made by? It may be the wars of the future may be won by the people with the better software, which is a really interesting thing to think about in terms of the history of warfare. But yeah, I think unless there's anything else, we do want to get into that final topic, our discussion of today. So that discussion is what comes after Quest 3. And there are quite a few subtopics within this. The context is that earlier this week, I should say, UploadVR reported that Meta has scrapped its two previously leading candidates for a Quest 4 series. So these were reported by The Information around a year ago to be Meta's plans for a Quest 3 successor, and we expect that they would have been branded Quest 4 and Quest 4S and be direct successors to Quest 3 and Quest 3S at roughly the same price point, plus or minus $100 either side. They were on schedule to be launched in 2026, and our understanding from the sources we've spoken to is that these would have been relatively traditional form factor quests that do the same thing as each generation so far. So each generation of Quest, 1 to 2 to 3, has seen a doubling in GPU power, an increase in resolution, alongside some other improvements. Quest 3 was the biggest leap yet, right? But it also had a little price increase. I shouldn't say little, it's $200. It's a significant price increase. Meta's strategy originally for Quest 4 series would have been the same thing again, just double the GPU power, improve resolution, add eye tracking. All of the headsets we're about to discuss feature eye tracking. But essentially, it was just going to keep on the same strategy. So alongside cancelling these plans for Quest 4 and Quest 4S next year, Meta is accelerating its plans for an extremely light open periphery headset with a tethered compute puck running the same Horizon OS as today's Quest headsets. This ultralight headset, codenamed Puffin, Meta is hoping to launch by the end of 2026. And so multiple sources have told UploadVR that this is Meta's current plan. What they've also told us is that Meta is exploring multiple different display system approaches for Puffin at multiple different price points, and they haven't settled on which they will ship. But in general, Meta's current primary plan, which could change at any time, is to release an ultralight headset with an open periphery. That means it doesn't have a face pad touching the side of your face. You can see out the sides. Design that has a tethered puck that has the computing hardware and battery. The only headset we've seen do that in this industry that I'm aware of is Magic Leap 2 and Magic Leap 1, of course. The Information first reported on the existence of this headset called Puffin around 9 months ago. They said that it resembles a bulky pair of glasses and weighs less than 110 grams. They also said that it features eye tracking for the gaze and pinch input system, the same input system as Apple Vision Pro. You look with your eyes and you pinch your index finger to your thumb. So the existence of Puffin was confirmed by Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth to The Verge just after Meta Connect. So The Verge's Alex Heath had a discussion with Andrew Bosworth and said, look, there's this report that you're working on this kind of really light headset. Is that directionally correct? And he indicated, yes, that is directionally correct. Just yesterday, the Wall Street Journal reported that this headset should be priced less than $1,000 according to Meta's current plans. So take that as whatever way you want, but I think that means, either 800, 900, or it could even just mean 999, as in right under that $1,000. That's the kind of price range we're expecting from this headset. And so the thing about this is that some people have assumed that this is going to be called something other than Quest, but my understanding from what the sources are telling us is that Meta has not decided on a name. Meta has not even decided on a solid plan. We should note what Andrew Bosworth, the CTO of Meta, commonly says, which is that Meta is always working on different headsets in parallel, and most of them, in fact, get killed before launch, and the ones that launch are the ones that we all see in the world, but many, many headsets get killed. And so if you only look at which headset was killed, there were other Quest 3 candidates that were killed that didn't become a Quest 3. There were other Quest Pro candidates. So to be crystal clear, the 2 leading Quest 4 candidates have been cancelled. But what our sources indicate is that there is a other Quest 4 traditional form factor candidate that most likely wouldn't ship until 2027. So next year, you get this ultralight headset with a tethered puck. The year after, in 2027, potentially, assuming it doesn't get killed too, you get a traditional form factor Quest. But one very important thing to note is that both of these devices, all of the devices we just discussed, are running the same Horizon OS as today's Quest headsets. This Puffin headset is not an offshoot of Orion. It is not coming from the AR glasses, smart glasses team. It is essentially a highly miniaturized Quest with the computing and battery offloaded with an open periphery design.
Yeah, we talk about this so much, and I'm seeing the discussion of the prices out there. It feels like, right, $500 to $800 is the maximum you're going to pay for a game system. Like, you're going to, I don't know, maybe go and disagree with me out in the comments, right? There are those sim flyers who are spending $3,000 to $5,000 on their setups, but you're doing other things with that sim setup, probably, right? You're probably also working on that device. It's not just your play machine. I suppose maybe if you have enough luxury spending to give yourself a little play machine over there, and then you have a nice little work laptop that's your get going Chromebook. But we spend so much time talking about these prices, and I have to acknowledge that from $1,000 up to $4,000 or even $5,000 is a big range where someone is willing to pay for a computer that's going to be their workhorse for, I don't know, 3 to 10 years, right? Like that is in the field of reasonability. So is this Meta acknowledging we're ready to build a personal computer now?
Yeah, so well, look, when it comes to the purpose of Puffin, this ultralight headset with a tethered puck, it is clear that they're trying to do what Apple Vision Pro does, but in a lighter and cheaper design. So the focus of this headset is highly likely to be on virtual screens, having as many virtual screens as you want, wherever you want, as big as you want, whether that be sitting on a plane and having your work in front of you and a gigantic cinema screen behind you, whether it be, lying in bed and streaming from your PC using Steam Link or something like that. Sometimes the source of these virtual screens is going to be local, right? It's going to be the web browser. It's going to be apps like Disney Plus and Netflix. We'll discuss that Disney report from the Wall Street Journal soon. Other times it's going to be leveraging compute from other devices. So your Windows 11 PC, right? Meta currently has that experimental feature in Horizon OS where it's a pretty direct copy of Apple's Mac Virtual Display System, where you just look at the little floating button that appears above your laptop and pinch, and it instantly brings up, your triple screen setup where you can spawn your triple screens. It's built into the OS. You can literally do this inside other apps, right? You can be in VR chat and have your laptop open, for example. I'm still skeptical of Horizon OS being a computing platform on its own, other than if you can currently do a task on a Chromebook, as in everything you need to do is in a web browser. But I do think that this is where the Microsoft partnership is a huge focus for Meta. I think you're going to see, Meta recommending using this for work alongside a Microsoft Windows 11 laptop. And I think you're going to see, Microsoft recommending that if you want to do this kind of spatial computing, that you go and pick up this headset. But it's also going to be a lot for entertainment, right? So I'll just bring up that Wall Street Journal report. It claimed around $1,000 price. It also said that Meta is currently courting, that was their exact word, courting big Hollywood firms like Disney and A24, trying to get them to produce immersive video content, as well as, I understand, trying to get the rectangular 3D content from the likes of Disney. So Meta wants a Disney Plus app on Horizon OS, just like there's a Disney Plus app on Vision Pro. It's one of the best. People talk about, Vision Pro doesn't have apps. Disney Plus is one of the best apps because you have a bunch of 3D movies as well as all of the kind of traditional flat Disney content. Meta wants that badly. They want that, of course. They also want these companies to build immersive video content. So we were just talking about Apple Immersive Video. They want both series and standalone short films and films from these companies. According to the Wall Street Journal, these are still early talks, but Meta is offering millions of dollars to these companies to do it. So it's quite clear that entertainment is going to be a massive focus. And I think for computing, it's going to be more leveraging your laptop, Windows 11.
So, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts here as we've covered the bulk of our show, and I want to leave an open space here for discussion here as we get into the last bit of this. But Apple already did this 3 or 4 years ago. Like they already went through this process of courting Hollywood creators in very substantial ways. And we have only actually seen the first wave of this content rollout. We saw Encounter Dinosaurs, which we've discussed. Go watch that video on our channel, where that's Jon Favreau repeating the magic that he recreated with Gnomes and Goblins back in the Vive in 2016, 2017, completely in standalone VR with a dinosaur, a really believable dinosaur tracking your head movements around in VR.
Sure, it's an incredible. Encounter Dinosaurs is incredible, but it's a 5-minute introductory experience. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about Meta wants TV series that are filmed in immersive 180 3D. It's more equivalent to the Apple Immersive Video, and it does sound like they're going to be investing more, but it also, Apple, as you rightly say, they do have a lot of this on Vision Pro. The problem with Vision Pro, I don't think, is Apple's content investment. The problem is that it's $3,500 and 600 grams on your face. Meta's hope is that they can do the same thing, but at a third of the price or less, and with a significantly lighter headset. That information, 110 grams, if they can pull that off, is insane, right? That's like, we're talking like big screen beyond level weight, a big screen beyond 2 level weight, I should say. Like in a headset that you don't need a PC for, that has hand tracking, eye tracking, all of this. If they can pull this off, this is going to be significantly more appealing. Most people find that Vision Pro too heavy, even if it was affordable.
And all I can think of is was it Jason Rubin's comment going around in my head saying, "You never forget the cord," right? Like that was this. It was like an edict that he sort of hinted that Meta had come to realize about why it needed to be wireless this whole time. And here we are coming back to the architecture used by the Apple Vision Pro in order to get that Encounter Dinosaurs experience to sing the way it does.
Well, it's more than that, right? But I understand you're just using it as an example. But no, absolutely, this is a vindication of Apple's general architecture. You could argue that Apple didn't go far enough. They only offloaded the battery. There are huge engineering issues in offloading the compute. But you're also right to say that Meta is going to have to walk back some of its executive statements. When they first revealed Quest 3 on stage at Connect 2023, they were, singing the praise of the fact that it didn't have any wire. Andrew Bosworth even got up on stage and mimicked having a compute puck or battery, being like, there's no wire coming down to something at your side. He was doing this on stage. And then, now there's a massive reversal. And, it's not that this was completely wrong. I do agree with Jason Rubin, the Oculus executive, that you never do forget you have the wire. With the Vision Pro that I have, I never forget that wire. And it really is an inconvenience. It is not a free trade-off. It is a significant trade-off. But if you're just designing a headset that's for just sitting down, and that's the primary focus, it makes sense. I'm a lot more skeptical. about whether it's going to go this way. For standing room scale VR, there is, I think Jay is in our comments, Jay Devon, saying that, like, they're very against this. They don't even want it to be called a Quest. I see other commenters suggesting branding like it might be called Quest Air. I do just want to focus that, like, I don't think this is one of those things where, like, all headsets are going to go like this. I think this is going to be a very specific headset use case category where we're starting to see divergence in how these headsets are designed, where it's not possible to have a jack of all trades. You have to optimize for something, and you have to trade off other things. You either optimize for having this integrated, standalone, frictionless, just put it on your head and go experience, where you don't have a wire and you're free to run around and dance in VR and fight people with swords and swing your arms around and not care about ever snagging on some wire, or you optimize for having something that's really light and comfortable on your head. And you can't. The laws of engineering and physics mean you just can't have both at once.
Fascinating. I love our discussion. Everyone is all over the board on what they want, what they don't want. I have to insist, I wrote an article about the smaller bag that the Apple Vision Pro that they released in the Apple stores for the Apple Vision Pro. It's about half the size of the original bag that shipped with this thing. And I showed it to James in our comments out here. And he's like, is the Vision Pro really inside this thing? I'm like, yep, go take a look at it. And it's stuffed just perfectly in. It's got a little lens cover that's built into the bag to protect it from the really heavy wire that could scrape the lenses and stuff like that. And I've got space in there for a mini iPad, an iPad mini, as well as a keyboard. And that's all I need, right, in a device. Our commenters have pointed out, and this is my official advice to others, okay? Quest Pro, as it is right now, is not enough computing power to replace your laptop. You don't get, as David has pointed out, Xcode and other major.
I think you meant Vision Pro. Yeah, Vision Pro.
Yeah. Vision Pro is what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah.
So Vision Pro, as David has pointed out, Xcode and things like that aren't available built into the Vision Pro. All those high-end apps, even things like GarageBand, beautiful creativity apps, don't exist on the Vision Pro in standalone, or even, like, really, if you pull them up in iPad mode, it's not great. And I don't even know if you can in some of those cases. Point is, there's just a huge canvas for Apple to paint on with upgrades to their software platforms over the next 2 years that are going to dramatically change what it means to just buy a headset and then install great apps for it. Then you combine that with the things that David is suggesting Reality Labs is pursuing. Now you get it ultra lightweight. You get that this thing is a beast because they put in a whole bunch of things that Meta wasn't even ready to ship yet, right? The personas and the reverse pass-through display, that's adding weight,
yeah,
right?
4K displays. Yeah, Vision Pro is a very, very maximalist view of this. I see a lot of our commenters saying, Vision Pro is the worst of both worlds, right? It's a tethered puck, and it's still 600 grams on your face. So there are people who are saying that, they would actually accept the trade-off of the puck if you do get the light headset. And we should point out that, like, we're talking about how Meta wants to do this for this price and do these capabilities. Apple's not going to sit on their laurels either, right? We eagerly await to see what they show off on a software level at WWDC. There's been many rumors about, a Vision Pro 2. We don't know when that might arrive, but we have Bloomberg and other sources suggesting that it's either late this year or early next year, while one Chinese lone source even claimed it was in production and had a list of, like, suppliers. So we really have to see kind of what happens there. Yeah.
I have something I want to say about AI here, right? Right now, nobody knows why they're supposed to go buy a new computer, right? Like, our audience probably does, right? They want to go buy it for VR or to play great games. But the average Joe's out there, right? You don't sell them a computer by saying this computer does AI. Like, that's not a task that a buyer goes, I want to go buy a computer to do. Like, I don't buy a computer to do AI. That's not the action. The action is, what creative tasks do I get aided by, creating the software in? And I think there's a mismatch in our audience over, like, what we can use spatial computers for. And I want to leave this. I want to leave this section off with my
Hold on, I think
ode to AirTags,
I was
David.
just
I
going to say, I
need to
think we have a
give my
lot
ode
more.
to AirTags.
You're saying leave this section off. I do think we have a lot more to discuss here. Like there's a
Okay.
lot, unless
Okay.
you do you have a hard cut or?
No, we can keep talking. Yeah, I didn't know how much more you wanted to cover here, but I need to talk about AirTags and
Sure. Do you want to put that at the end maybe after we talk
others.
about the Puffin headset?
Well, yeah, the Puffin headset. I want to know what happens when Meta ships a headset that doesn't include controllers and doesn't depend on reusing those controllers as tracked objects to give me really cool things to do in VR.
Well, we very much so expect that this headset will not include controllers. I think a really interesting question that brings up is, will it support controllers? So this is obviously a headset that's designed to be used with the gaze and pinch input system. You look with your eyes and pinch with your fingers, but will it support Touch Plus? It's a really interesting question. The other question, let's just kind of wrap up Puffin, because we also want to discuss the ASUS Horizon OS headset. There's a lot actually to discuss here. The other question is, like, if you are wanting a headset for traditional gaming, is this the right upgrade path? That's something we'll talk about in a short second. The other question I think a lot of commenters are asking, if it is $1,000, what kind of displays do we expect? Because one of the reasons that we've said that Apple Vision Pro is capable of turning screens into software, replacing your traditional screens or acting as a portable giant monitor or triple monitor setup, is that it has those near 4K micro OLED panels. I think, as some of the commenters point out, it's extremely unlikely that we see 4K micro OLED panels arrive in a $1,000 headset next year. I can't see that happening unless Meta is willing to take a huge loss. I mean, the panels alone, unless they're going to get a lot cheaper by next year, which I don't expect, they will get cheaper, but not that much cheaper. The panels alone are the same cost as like a Quest 3. You're talking, $400 to $600 for the panels. I can't see them somehow figuring everything out. But what I see some commenters pointing out is that it still could be micro OLED. You could get the same kind of 2.5K micro OLEDs that are in Big Screen Beyond, Big Screen Beyond 2 as well. Maybe there are 3K micro OLEDs coming that would be suitable. But I see like some people kind of asking, I don't care about this screens use case. I just want a gaming headset. When am I going to be able to upgrade my Quest 3 to something that is a direct upgrade path? And so that's kind of, we said earlier that
they're looking for those people are the ones looking for the third parties. They're looking for information on those third party headsets.
Yeah, they're looking for ideally Quest 4, but I think while we do see that Meta does, according to our sources, have a traditional form factor Quest 4 planned for 2027. In the meantime, that's a long time to wait. If you're a Quest 3 owner who bought, say, for example, in 2023, and you do want the cutting edge, you're the kind of person who, for you're a VR enthusiast, you don't want to wait 4 years for the next best thing. You already are saying, I want more, I want better. And I do think that's where this ASUS ROG partnership is going to come in. So we kind of have talked before, Ian, you've kind of said, I don't understand how ASUS is going to compete with kind of Quest 4. And I think this change of information, this change of priorities by Meta actually puts ASUS in a much better position. If you were the ASUS ROG brand that is working on a gaming-focused Horizon OS headset, because they have confirmed that theirs is designed to be a gaming-focused headset, you're going to be pretty happy about hearing that the direct upgrade path to Quest 3 or Quest 4 is not something that Meta is currently prioritizing. And I do suspect that for the people who just want a better Quest 3, right? You want higher resolution, maybe local dimming, eye tracking, maybe a battery in the rear or whatever. I think that this headset from ASUS ROG is probably going to be your direct upgrade path. And it would be a lot different if there was no headset from ASUS. I see a lot of people are very skeptical of this. There's some people that when I say this to, they say, but I wanted a direct Quest 3 upgrade. And I say, well, ASUS is making one. They say, I don't believe it. I haven't seen it. It doesn't exist. And that's fine. Nor do any of the headsets we just discussed, right? You haven't seen them. None of them have images out there. But Luna, the VR enthusiast, did post recently some LinkedIn posts showing that there are ASUS employees working on this Horizon OS headset project today. And I think one of these companies is going to have to show something soon if they want people to believe it. But at the same time, they are obviously also going to want to wait to see when they have something ready, right? There is always this clamor of, I don't believe it until it's real. We see this all the time with the Vision Pro, with even Quest 3, right? There were people who, by the time the Quest 3 had CAD renders leaked everywhere, and Mark Gurman from Bloomberg had said he'd tried the damn thing. There were people saying they didn't believe it. I do understand the skepticism on ASUS, though. It's obviously, we haven't heard anything beyond over a year ago, Meta and ASUS saying we're making this.
Yeah, Andrew Bosworth, I want to say, had a pretty hard burn against Android XR, saying that that they differentiate by shipping from Android XR. That's how Meta differentiates. By existing, yeah. Which is a pretty big burn, but we can apply that same burn to these also, these third-party headsets, trying to see where they fit into Meta's product family that they're trying to spin up relative to Android XR. I need to go back and say my piece, David. So
there's a few questions here from people about the ASUS headset. Siegfried Greeting is asking, will it have all my Meta games? Yes, this is a Horizon OS headset that ASUS ROG is working on, and it will run all the same Quest content. It will be just like when you get a new Android phone and all of your Play Store apps are there, right? Or, just like when you get a new computer and all of your Steam apps are still there. It's not a different operating system. It's Meta Horizon OS and the Meta Horizon OS store. Now, I know you really want to talk about your AirTags idea, so let's just see if there are any other comments on Puffin, on ROG, and then we can move on to that from our commenters here. A lot of people have a lot of interesting takes here. Subcog saying buying an ASUS branded headset with higher res screens just before Quest 4 launches would be a major mistake. We don't know whether Quest 4 is going to launch in 2026, right? The current candidate would be 2027. If this headset pops up 6 months from now, that's just a random guess. I do promise you I don't have any insider information. That would mean that Quest 4 might be 18 months away. It could be 2 years away. Meta may even cancel the traditional form factor Quest 4 altogether. From our understanding, Meta's top priority is on this different form factor ultralight headset right now. I just want to point, the one thing I want to finish this off is by asking the question that nobody I think has asked yet, or at least I haven't seen the comments. Why? Why might Meta have made this change? Why go from the keep on going, keep trucking strategy of just improve Quest over time? And I think the answer behind that is definitely down to the Q1 results from Reality Labs. So as we covered on this show before, in Q1 of this year, Meta reported its financial results, and Reality Labs, the division of the company that makes the Quest headsets, the Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses, that is researching AR glasses and the wristband and all of that, and codec avatars and does Horizon Worlds, was down 6% in revenue compared to the same quarter in 2024. And that was actually a big surprise for a lot of analysts, including us, because just before, in Q4, they had their best ever revenue quarter. And so what does this suggest? This suggests that Quest 3S had a very strong launch and was a popular gift at Christmas, but that momentum has completely collapsed into the new year. And I think this may have caused Meta to do a kind of fundamental reevaluation of their headset hardware strategy. I think what they're looking at now is, how do we make a product that doesn't just sell well at Christmas, that isn't just a Christmas gift? How do we make a product that people actually buy throughout the year? Again, look at these trends here. You have these massive spikes at Christmas, and then you have 2024 was up from 2023, but it was still lower than 2021 and 2022 when it comes to Q1, the first quarter of the year, right? Similar trend on Q3 last year. We will obviously be very, very eagerly watching for the Q2 results to come in, and we'll be reporting on that. But like, if you're Meta and you're looking at this, right, you've just done 2 headsets in 2 years, right? You've brought Quest 3, which is a massive upgrade. Anyone who says that the Quest 3 isn't a big upgrade from the Quest 2, you are objectively wrong. It is a crazy upgrade. The lenses are generationally ahead. You have mixed reality. The controllers don't have those big annoying rings anymore that you don't smash together. The GPU is twice as powerful. You have fully adjustable lenses. The Quest 3 is this massive upgrade, and it sells well, right? It brings Meta to its biggest revenue ever when it launches, and it reverses the trend of reversal from 2022 to 2023, but it doesn't. You can see how it falls off, right? It gets down to Q3 just before Quest 3S being like lower than 2021 and 2022. So then Meta says, okay, we'll give you the capabilities of Quest 3, but with the lenses and displays of Quest 2. Quest 3S comes out, right? So clearly they think, okay, the price was the problem for Quest 3. Here we go. Kaboom. You get the highest ever revenue. But then you go into Q1. You've got both of these headsets on the market. In theory, this should be a growing business, but it isn't. So this is actually kind of, you very rarely hear us talk about this, but the numbers are the numbers and they don't lie. Like the strategy of just upgrading the Quest and just doing the same thing again, of the same form factor, the same strategy, the same approach, it isn't working. It currently is not working. And we can talk about how that could be down to macro factors. It could be down to changes in the economy. It could be down to the fact that people just spend more time on TikTok and Instagram reels and don't want this kind of content. You can talk about, maybe you think that their software strategy was wrong. But if you're Meta's perspective, right, you're going to say, maybe we need to rethink this. And maybe we need to find out something that is more appealing to a mass market, because Meta's strategy is not how do we appeal to the same people over and over again. What they care about, for better and for worse, is how do we massively grow this. And this is not massive growth. It's the opposite. And that's why I think you could have seen a complete reversal of strategy on Meta's behalf.
Yeah, and then we go to my sort of thing. So that ended up being a really, really good transition to some of the things I'm trying to say, and I'm loving all of the comments here, discussing all the different things. I'm going to throw out the name Oculus as a name for the next headset. I think they should just call it Oculus, the Oculus One, the Oculus. They should be calling Puffin that.
So Meta Oculus?
Oculus.
Well, it's from the company Meta, right? So
yeah, the Meta Oculus. They should just call Puffin that, right? And then we bring back to my core question: what do people want to do with their spatial computers? If we assume that VR is the future, and we assume that spatial computing is really a thing, what do people do with it? And what we go in circles week after week after week is like no one really knows. No one has a good case for it other than, oh man, going to an immersive game for 8 hours is like going to another world for 8 hours is wildly, wildly cool. And you give yourself enough cool interactions to play with in that world, and boom, you've got a really nice trip out there. But like, that's not 8 hours of work. That's not saving me money. That's not making me money. It's not changing my life in fundamental ways. It's, the other things I buy a computer for, right?
Yeah, the other things, I mean, the argument I guess you can make is that the other things the headsets are too heavy for, right? It's not that they can't do things other than immersive gaming. You can already do all of the things we've been talking about, spawning your monitors and all of that, and watching your giant Netflix screen. It's just, it sucks if the headset's 500 grams in your face. So I just wonder if like Meta is thinking, right, the problem is that these headsets are just too uncomfortable for people to want to wear for hours on end that aren't super enthusiastic. The one kind of a reversal to the doom and gloom here, as I think David was pointing out, retention is up. So they do actually have more people spending more time in the headsets, but overall sales are not growing at the level they want. So I think that if you're Meta's perspective and you're saying retention is up but hardware is down, you're actually thinking the problem isn't the software, it's the hardware, and that's why you could see that kind of reevaluation. See a lot of our commenters saying, look, 500 grams is just too much. 300 grams is the max. Rudel says. I see other people saying, yep, it's just too heavy. The things you're talking about, Ian, these other use cases that go beyond just Gorilla Tag and Beat Saber, they require a comfortable headset that you want to wear for hours on end.
It's not just comfort. Like, you're right, but it's power. What I'm looking at, the Vision Pro, a $3,500 face computer that I sold my car to afford, is not enough of a computer, even though it's that price and does all those things to obviate the need for my Mac virtual display, right? And here I want to go back. I want to go to my AirTags, and I want to give this example, right? I sat there on my Mac, and I installed Xcode, and I became an Apple developer and used ChatGPT to generate code that I pasted straight into Xcode over the course of a weekend. And then I put on my Apple Vision Pro, and my app appeared as a volume right in front of me. And if I had been in standalone, like on a Vision Pro 2, with 2 billion more transistors, whether it's in the headset or in the pack, to maybe run Xcode on those additional number of transistors, the experience for me at the end of the day would have been like, hey, ChatGPT, build me a VR newspaper. And appearing as a volume right in front of me would be my VR newspaper app that I just asked for the code from this app right here, and it's now a volume floating right in front of me. And what's remarkable about this, David, with this model in your head that our audience, if they don't have a Vision Pro, don't have yet, is right. If I'm building like this in VR, I've got my code creation window here, whatever assistant is helping me. And then I've got my volume right here where the thing that the code is making actually builds this thing right here. I've also got 6 other windows all around me at any given time to keep an eye on the baseball game over here, the security cameras over here, all my other things all floating around this very core task of, I'm just going to tell the robot what I want, and here it is. And I'm going to refine it again and again and again until it takes the exact shape I want. Now, that hasn't even gotten to the AirTags portion of this, but I think what I've tried to sell is, okay, if your model for working with a computer isn't this, you're behind the times. Like this should be your model for how you make things in the future, 5-10 years from now. Like, yes, do you remember Scotty walking up to the computer in 1985 and going, "Oh, how quaint." Right? We're living in that time, folks. This is the year when that starts happening. So I'm sorry. That was, I want to talk.
I think it's interesting, but you touch on something there that you do need the Mac there, right? It's actually the Mac doing all of the, Xcode stuff and doing the compiling and all. But that's not a hardware issue. It's not that Apple Vision Pro is not powerful enough to do these things on board. It's one of the fundamental problems with Vision OS. We will talk about how amazing Vision OS is all the time because of its architecture, of the shared space with the volumes in Windows and automatic lighting interactions and all of that. But fundamentally, it's a mobile operating system. It's based on iPad OS. You're running iPad apps. You can't, if you take away that Mac and just have a keyboard, nothing you just said happens. You can't have Xcode. You can't have Photoshop. You can't have Premiere. You can't have Unity. None of these actual computer creation tools are there. And this isn't just a problem with Vision Pro. People have talked about this for endless hours in the tech industry since Apple introduced the iPad Pro, because Apple's pitch was the iPad Pro is your next computer. And the problem is, no, it isn't, because it doesn't run computer software. And until every year, every Apple blog and Apple fan says, what I want at WWDC is for iPad OS to run Mac apps. I want to see iPad OS run Mac apps on the iPad Pro. I want to see iPad OS become a real computing system. And every year, Apple says, here's a new way to organize your Windows. But no, you're going to stay on the App Store. If you want to do real work, go buy a Mac. And I think that is a crippling problem for the pitch you're making of Vision Pro as a computer, because any serious computing you're doing, you might as well just have something that it doesn't have all this power, because it's being wasted. If you're sitting there using Mac Virtual Display, you're barely touching the M2, right? All of the real computing is happening on the Mac. If Apple came out next week, and we have no idea what Apple's going to announce, but what I would want more than anything, I don't think it's going to happen, but if Apple came out and said Vision OS can now run a virtual Mac, right? So it's Mac Virtual Display, except it really is virtual. There's no physical Mac involved. Mac OS is running in Vision OS as an actual virtual machine, and you can use all of this software. That would turn Vision Pro into a real computer. To me, and this is just my view, it is not a real serious computer until it can run Mac apps.
I don't disagree. I'm seeing mention of Swift Playgrounds. I played with Swift Playgrounds. I coded things with Swift Playgrounds. I got the basic concepts of how Swift works from that, and then I used AI to generate all my code, and like it worked, right? Like and to your point of like needing the keyboard, I'm not convinced you need the keyboard. Like you can copy and paste text in the open air pretty effectively. It's getting better with each passing gen, and it's
So,
passable now.
so I mean, okay. I presume you mean like through speech, speech to
Uh,
text.
like
I mean, how do you write an article or
I
without a
have
keyboard?
dictated 4 articles
Okay,
from directly from Vision Pro into the website you
sure.
made, and I pinch dragged around the sections that were incorrect, deleted, and then re-dictated a couple sentences directly into the browser.
Sure, and that's great when you're at home, but would you do that on a train or a plane? Would you speak out loud what you're saying? How would you enter text if
Oh,
you're on a
good
plane or a
question.
train or a
Yeah,
bus?
interesting. Well, all right. So what's fascinating there is what I want is a Mac keyboard, right? I want my Mac board where it has no discrete. It's actually half the size
Yeah,
of
but
the MacBook keyboard. Like it's just the keyboard. It doesn't even have the trackpad or anything. It's just
it's a
letting me
great
type a
idea.
little bit faster.
But what I'm saying is you you don't need that. You can get a $20 Bluetooth keyboard or Apple's fancy $100 one. There's nothing stopping what I'm saying. The Vision Pro could be the computer, and then you don't have to carry all these separate things. It's just your headset and your keyboard. And
S-
none of these headsets do that. And I don't want to get into Valve because that's a whole hour long discussion. But Valve, interestingly, is the only company that might actually bring a desktop OS architecture to standalone VR through SteamOS, right? It is a desktop OS. Obviously, it doesn't have the same level of app support as Windows and Mac, but Apple was the company that could have done this, right? Apple is the company that actually had the opportunity. And it's so frustrating to me. But
So
I understand, sure, with your Mac, I guess you can just use it, right?
I have a Shadow PC. I signed up for Shadow PC for a month to try it out, and I use the iPad app on Shadow PC, and it is better than Mac Virtual Display because I can go like this. I pinch, and I'm moving my mouse cursor off of a PC that's in the cloud, right? And then I double pinch, and I click on icons that are on that PC in the cloud. I've operated that entire PC without a Mac and a keyboard, and then I get my Mac mouse and keyboard out, and it gets a little bit easier to use that. This is we're going a little circular. What I wanted to point out is AI can close the gap between this interface that like you have on mouse and keyboard and the interface that we need to really make amazing things in VR. That's my argument.
And the only counter argument I'm making is that nobody wants to talk to their computer in public. In their home, sure, some people do. A lot of people don't. There's this great article that someone put out kind of against Amazon Alexa in the early days, and you can argue about how well it's aged, which is that like it argued that one of Silicon Valley's fundamental flaws in understanding normal people is that normal people don't want to talk to things that aren't living. And there are actually a lot of people who just will never talk to a computer. In no circumstance will they ever speak to Alexa, Siri, Google. It's just weird and not what they want to do. And I think sometimes in the tech industry, we dramatically underestimate how many people will never talk to a computer system. And again, everyone won't do it on a bus. Okay, maybe some people. You might get that one crazy person sending their, explicit messages to their wife
Well,
out loud while they're on the bus. But even if you want to do it for safe things, right? There's always going to be a time where you want to say something private and the other person. So you
I,
need an input device that has the portability of voice, doesn't require a keyboard, but also has the kind of privacy of a keyboard. And that's where Meta's kind of wristbands could become useful at some point, but we'll have to see whether that's something that has the fidelity for keyboard typing anytime soon. Mark
Mhm.
Zuckerberg did have that statement to you, did he not, of 2028? He hopes that you can put on 2 wristbands and replace a keyboard.
Yep.
We'll have to
I
see, I guess.
We have it in our comments of people looking for that wristband, and I've got an editorial that is half written that I need to pull the trigger on publishing and getting it out there. But yeah, Thomas Reardon, I think is his name, the head of the Control Labs team that's been working at Meta. I went face to face with him in 2022 at Meta's research headquarters, and Andrew Bosworth is sitting over there and says that Thomas Reardon can replace his keyboard with the wristbands on his wrist. I still haven't gotten to say my AirTags thing. And if Geek Odin is still in the comments from Virtual Desktop, he's brought up previously on the show that he's pretty skeptical of the all-day use case of using VR for work. And so I'm curious if he has any use case that he does expect people to use VR all day for. And here I want to go back to the AirTags thing and my AirTag fantasy thing that I want. I want a small object that is magnetically chargeable that I can attach to anything and track it with low latency and high precision. And I want my system to recognize what that object is once I've attached to it. And I would even pay hundreds of dollars if there was a pro version of said object that had a small haptic motor built in to just do a small little vibration every time I get that high precision, low latency object tracking out of it.
Yeah, you want Pico trackers, but smaller and in the Apple ecosystem. I understand the idea. It would be fascinating to see Apple do that. I just wonder if by the time it becomes sensible for them to do so from a market size perspective, they might just have computer vision good enough by then. We have static object tracking in Vision OS 2. Will this rumored Vision Pro 2 is supposed to go from an M2 to an M5? That's a gigantic performance improvement. I wonder, will Apple be able to just do direct kind of computer vision tracking? Of course, it's always better to have an IMU, but it just doesn't seem very Apple to me to stick AirTags to objects, but I'd love to be proven wrong about that. It doesn't. Yeah, I see you very much.
Clip it out for me. All right, clip it out. Put it in a safe space. All right, no,
I would love to be proven wrong. I did say that. Just
all right.
Geek Odin has responded to you. You kind of baited him in saying, give us your opinion. Geek Odin, deeply ironically, the developer of Virtual Desktop, the app that's originally designed to bring your desktop into VR, before it was done for PC VR streaming, the whole purpose of the app was just putting your desktop up. The deeply ironic part is that he is a deep skeptic of the idea of doing your work in VR by having your virtual monitors up. You would think that he wouldn't be given his application, but I think that shows that his conviction is true, right? If someone who literally makes an app for this is saying he doesn't believe it, that's a good sign of conviction. However, I do see you say being tried dozens of times and it always fails. I think that's the fallacy of no existing technology could do this before, therefore no future technology could. And I think that's what really fascinates me about Puffin. You're absolutely right to say that for most people, every time it's been tried with a 500-gram brick on your face, they don't want to do it. I don't think that tells us anything about whether they would want to do it with a 110-gram sleek, open peripheral, sort of goggles style thing on their head would want to. I don't think those things, are equivalent there. You need to say, what is the value you get relative to the weight on your face? And as the weight decreases and the value increases, I do think you're going to get something there. Geek Odin is pointing out it was never meant for work. I mean, okay, but you sell an app that brings up your PC monitor. I hate to break it to you, a lot of people are going to use it for work.
so and I love Davin saying that they've used it since the Rift CV1. They've used Virtual Desktop for that whole time, and they're using it to code while my monitor is powered off. My PC is used to be in my bedroom, and the light would keep my spouse awake. I use the Vision Pro in the exact same way today. It's fascinating to see. I
remember writing my review of Virtual Desktop for Oculus Go in Virtual Desktop for Oculus Go.
Oh, fantastic!
So, I remember that being one of my first kind of reviews.
So let me go back to my AirTag sort of philosophy here, and go ahead and disagree with me, anyone out there. I'm convinced that VR's magic, one of the biggest use cases that will ever be for these spatial computers, is performance capture. It's literally what David and I are doing right now. We're doing performance capture. I got my hands tracked with high fidelity and and a high precision. My voice and everything is animating this face movement, and we're using $300 and $500 headsets. One of the reasons we're not using the $3,500 headsets for this is because it's a huge software pull, and Apple's not even giving us access to the avatars to do this. Right? We can't even pull in the persona avatars in order to do this kind of show with the avatars that Apple shows off on their $3,500 device. But what I'm getting at here is going my whole theme of you don't buy a computer to do AI. But what if AI helped you do performance capture for Hollywood movies or for your own creativity of just storytelling with a headset? What if the tracking was good enough out of just a headset and a couple body trackers or maybe an iPhone? I'm broken because I've got, is it Corey Strasburger is his name. If you can somehow find in your records, go find Senza Peso from Kite and Lightning. It was this Unreal Engine experience that ran on the DK2/Rift CV1 period. If you can go find a copy of it and run it somehow today, it's like a ride across the river Styx. And you've got these beautiful Unreal Engine visuals just blowing your brains out all over you just because of how beautiful and eye-catching it is. He spent years, one of the co-creators of that experience, messing with iPhone as a facial capture system as Apple started rolling out the APIs to use the face unlock sensor actually for facial motion capture. And so now there's all these rigs you see where people are mounting iPhones directly in front of their face and doing full motion capture that way. I'm convinced that it's a huge, huge, huge vertical that everyone in our audience kind of underplays. Just if you do motion capture at really high quality levels and reasonable prices, you're gonna it's not just motion capture, it's performance capture. What if you're playing guitar, playing piano, and all of that is getting fed into some kind of larger production? That's the area that I expect Apple to play in, and I wonder if Meta can get there, or if you asked at the earlier thing, what is Meta going to do with these computers?
So, I mean, there is one company that is quite literally targeting their headset very heavily around that, and it's Sony, right? Sony's standalone headset. This is done using just the trackers, but the Sony ZYN standalone headset that uses 4K micro OLED displays, it uses the XR2 Plus Gen 2. It's very similar to what you see from Play for Dream and Samsung in terms of the hardware. That's one of their core use cases, right? And they have this Mocopi Pro system. I think it's on the scale of Apple, it's relatively niche for them. I'm not saying nobody does it, but it's something that you expect a company that is kind of a more traditional electronics company targeting a niche like Sony to do. And I don't think Apple and Meta is going to look at this and go, this is what we need to design all our hardware around. I think Apple's focus is going to be, how do we scale this up to millions of consumers? Very interesting to see Guy Godin's comment here. The number of users that use my app for work is probably less than 1%, but you don't collect analytics. How could you possibly know that? You're checking what people do on their computers? How would you possibly know that?
Did any of you mess with iDVD, iWeb, iMovie? Those were delightful programs that let me create from otherwise from these files that are otherwise I've got to know code in order to link up the file menu system of the DVD player into this is what Apple does. They make it easy to do hard computing tasks that would otherwise be too difficult.
I think it's what the Apple of the noughties did for creation, right? Like Steve Jobs had this idea of the Mac as like the media center and the creation center of your home. I think if you look at what Apple became, shortly after the release of the iPhone, Apple renamed itself from Apple Computer to Apple. And I think you see this shift from the Macs that were designed for this kind of use case. The iPod was not designed to make music. It was designed to listen. The iPhone, of course, you can do a lot of creation tasks, but fundamentally it's a consumption device to consume the web, to call people, to send messages, etc., access your email, watch videos. The majority of people use their iPhone today to message people, video call people, and watch TikTok and Instagram, right? So it's I don't think that is actually their current focus as a company, though of course on the Mac side it is. The question again comes back to this big question of where is the Vision Pro in this? Like the iPad is kind of this middle ground of it's a content consumption device for the base models. It's supposed to be a computer for the Pro. What is Vision OS? What is Vision Pro? It's a great question. Is it a platform for creation? Or is it a platform for consumption? It comes back to Guy Godin's kind of, proposition here. Like, is this a technology for entertainment? Is it a technology for work and creation? These are questions that Apple, I don't think, knows yet. It only has we keep forgetting it only has a $3,500 early adopter product out. It doesn't know what the wider market wants, and I imagine it will experiment with it in the same way that with the Apple Watch, Apple didn't know what it was. The ways in which Apple Watch was marketed and pitched at the start is completely different to how it's marketed and pitched now. Over time, they figured out, what do people use these for? What do they buy them for? And then they lean hard into that.
Mm. We'll see. I can't wait to see what we get revealed next week. Encourage you to tune in to UploadVR.com and become a member and patron to support our work directly. And we'll be bugging David nonstop next week to get him to go sit down and write. He's got a crazy travel schedule, getting to WWDC and then getting to AWE. So please have some patience as you're refreshing UploadVR.com as we try to get the latest out of him next week, as he's got to navigate through the physical world with a headset in tow, at least one headset in tow, right? You'll have your Vision Pro with you, I see.
Yeah.
I love this discussion about AirTags, body tracking. I saw the one commenter out there saying that AI is coming for that market, and I get it. But what that's missing, what all the critics of AI look at the thing is, it's not exactly fun to type a prompt into a video generator and say in the prompt, give me a video of someone screaming. But it's actually super fun to scream into a camera, is my point, right? And it's actually super fun to scream into a camera and then stylize the screaming into all sorts of really weird ways. So yes, you could use the AI to produce it for you, but it's not fun. That's not the fun of acting. That's not the fun of performing and creating productions. So how do you use AI to close that gap is what I'm trying to hint at.
Sure. I think they may have also potentially just been meaning computer vision, like AI in the more general machine learning sense, as in, instead of strapping AirTags to stuff, you just use cameras and neural networks with computer vision software to track stuff. But yeah, it'll be fascinating there. I just want to see that we've really started a fight in the comments about the work thing. Guy Godin saying my Discord users, they none of them use it for work. I would maybe argue Discord is a very selective subset of your audience by definition. It's literally a platform for gamers to communicate. We have other people in the comments saying, I use virtual desktop for work every day. I have people that tell me all the time that they use virtual desktop for work. But none of us know, right? The question will be, when we do get headsets that are genuinely comfortable to wear for 4 hours plus, then do people do work? I don't know. Ian doesn't know. None of us know until we actually get these headsets that have comfort and fidelity in the same form factor.
Davin leaving us with a couple notes, some really great comments. Ian, look into Luma Modify. I'll check that out. Chrome saying creative process is not valued, content is. Let's see someone value that process. And
this comment that you'll achieve full body tracking by sellotaping 100 AirTags icons to yourself.
Yeah, you see that they're being funny, but I mean it's kind of hurtful because it's right on the nose a little bit there. So, and I love Davin. I can't wait to let AI do all the creative gaming and socializing for me, so I can get back to working myself to dust. Yeah, I love it. Anything else we want to close off on today? I want to say thank you to my team. And there was the question asking about where best to support us. We do encourage you to become a patron on UploadVR.com.
Yeah.
UploadVR.com is the best way to support us. We get the most amount of that support. So thank you for asking that question, Mindweaver. And totally understand if you need to put change around where you're supporting us. So thank you for everyone that supports us in both places. Yeah.
Yeah, we appreciate all support, but Google does take a small cut on YouTube, and that is actually significant in totality. I think we've had some really massive discussions today. Even that Anduril discussion would have been a huge one, but now with all of this change of meta hardware, with you coming up with other things to discuss as well, we've had some really big discussions.
Yeah, we covered military use of VR, the changing of the guard at Meta. This was a big show, and as always, if you've got someone out there who is on the fence trying to understand VR, we do encourage you to give them sort of our link. We know it's kind of hard to give them this deep dive link when it's like you just need to get your newbie into VR and let them understand the basics. And I don't know, David led off this discussion with a super deep dive technical rundown that probably would have hurt the brains of any newbie to VR, but we are trying to always be accepting of all those new people. Yeah. So thank you to everyone who time traveled to catch up to us. Thank you for all of your support. Arlen, I want to meet you in VR soon again and talk about things. And everyone else, we'll see you all in the future.
Thanks, everyone. I'm seeing some people say we didn't even get into Valve and wristbands and codec avatars and crazy. We could have spent 2 or 3 more hours.
You just gave a couple of people alcohol poisoning right at the end of our show, man. You take care of yourself. Don't do that.
Yeah, there's so much more we could discuss. Unfortunately, we do have a lot to do. It's an incredibly busy month. This is going to be a huge month for this industry, we can tell you. So keep your eyes on UploadVR.com. Tomorrow, the weekend, next week, there's a lot of interesting stuff coming up.
We'll see you.
Thanks.